Okay.
Hi, this is Linda Ellers from Great Glass Galore. Today I'm going to show you how to put your metal frame on your beginner stained glass project. So the types of frame we're going to be using, if you look down here, there's 3 different metals you can use to solder to your stained glass project. One is zinc, one is copper, and the other is brass. You cannot solder to stainless steel. You would have to get that too hot, and you'd have to get solder on it with a torch, and that would crack the glass. So today we're going to use your basic zinc frame. So if you look at this, it does not have a heart. I'll show you what that means in a minute. We're going to be able to cut it with heavy-duty wire cutters. Okay. Now you can see these go up in size. So this is what we're using is a 3/16 U zinc came, C-A-M-E. So the shape is a U. The same with this. This is 1/4 inch U. This is 3/8 inch U. This is 1/2 inch U, and you can also get 3/4 inch U. Okay, and you can get all those sizes in brass and copper, and you purchase them in 6-foot strips. Okay, so if you go up in size, you can see that these larger sizes have a heart, and so you need to cut these at a 45-degree angle in the corners to fit them together, and you have to use a hacksaw or a miter box saw with a metal saw blade or a blade for cutting metal. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this zinc came. So how you're going to cut it is you're going to fit it to your side. If it doesn't fit on, that means you have too much solder somewhere. You'll have to check where it is, and you'll need to flux and take that solder off if you have solder bulging over the edges. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure the length. So I'm going to mark it with my marking pen, and then I'm going to cut it. Okay, so I can't just cut the whole thing at once because you can see it scrunches the metal. So instead I need to cut top and bottom. So I'm going to cut top, and then I'm going to cut the bottom, and then I'm going to bend it to break the middle. Okay, so now if this end were out past 90 degrees, this one is, if I get my marker I can kind of draw it for you. So this edge sits past 90 degrees, and the edge we are using is slightly under 90 degrees, this angle right here. And if it's over 90, then that piece of framing would stick off the edge of your glass, so you would trim it a little bit. So we're not going to use this one, but you just trim it a little bit, again, top and bottom, so it's under that 90 degrees and more than 45. When you go to fit the pieces together, they're going to overlap each other. So on this piece, it's inside of this piece, but on the other side, it's on the outside of this piece. Okay, so they're going to overlap. They don't need to be a perfect 45 degrees or anything. Okay, so I've got this one cut, and I've cut the other 3. So now I'm going to tape it on. You're going to be soldering this on. So you want to get your iron plugged in. And I'm going to tape this on. I'm going to use electrical tape. I like electrical tape because it doesn't leave a residue on the glass if you leave it on for a while. You could probably use masking tape for this. You're not going to leave it on for very long. But I can stretch and pull the electrical tape so it's on nice and tight. You're going to be soldering all the corners of the frame and any intersecting solder joints, where the solder joints intersect with the frame. So don't put electrical tape over these joints. So put them on the 2 ends, but avoid the joints. So we'll go to this one. And we're going to put one side in and the other side out. It's okay if it's a little short or a little long. Usually that works. If it's too long, you'll need to cut a little more off an end. Usually if you bought the beginner materials from me, I will pre-cut these pieces for you. Same, one side is in and one side is out on this piece. And it's getting hung up right here. Yeah, there's a little solder on the top. So I'm going to put on my safety glasses. And I'll wait on the gloves, but I'm going to add a little flux. And I'm going to flatten that because that is in the way. Make sure the other side's flattened. And I'm just going to clean that flux off with a little Windex. Grab a paper towel. Okay, so now let's try this. See if that was my culprit. Sometimes it's the glass is thicker there. I'll show you the tool. Let me grab the... If the glass is too thick, you can use your bid tool, your lathican, and you can put this front part is wider here on this lathican, and you can get in there, lathican, and you can spread that if you need to if your glass is wider. Okay, so I got that on over there. I'm going to tape it on. Again, I won't put tape over any solder joints. I'll get this last side in. It's not going down either. Let's see if I can. My other trick sometimes too is I use a file, and I'll file down an edge. That's another trick. And sometimes that'll do it. Okay, close enough. Oh, more tape. Okay, now we're ready to solder this on. I'll sit down and I turn on my smoke absorber, but I'm going to leave it off so you can hear me. And I'm going to put on my gloves. When I'm handling the flux and the lead, I like to put my gloves on. Okay, so we're going to start by soldering the four corners to make sure they're stationary, and you're going to use your tacking techniques. So I'm going to grab my flux, and I'll put my iron here so maybe you can see that in the video. Grab some solder. I really usually like to use gel flux when I am soldering on a frame, unless I'm doing a copper frame, because the gel flux doesn't take copper patina really well. But the gel flux has a higher boiling temperature. This frame is going to get so hot that it quickly dries the liquid, the glass star liquid flux. So you usually use the gel flux. It doesn't dry quite as easily. But if you're getting beginner materials from me, I am giving you glass star flux. So you may just have to have your flux brush handy and then just keep adding flux as you go. What will happen is if the flux dries, the solder will get lumpy and peaky. And if you're not sure and the solder isn't flowing right and it's lumpy, add more flux. You can never have too much flux, okay? So again, I'm going to start with my iron. I'm going to hold my hand over the top so the iron is parallel to the table. And I'm going to wipe it once on each side. On the sides, I'm wiping just so it's nice and shiny. So I can grab my dot of solder. This is back to the tack soldering. And I'm going to touch down and lift up. And it's just going to be 1 second. If I touch down too long, the solder gets more liquid because the frame gets so hot and the solder goes through. And your goal is to cover up the seam where the two pieces connect. So I'm going to count 1 second. So I'll go 1 Mississippi or 1 1000. And it didn't quite, I want to cover it a little bit more. So I'm going to, now the metal's already heated, I'm going to do just 1. So I'm going to do 1 up. And after 2 tries, I'd have to probably add more flux, but that looks pretty good to me. So let's go on to the next corner. Okay, pick my iron up, wipe it once on each side, grab a dot of solder. And when I touch down, remember you have to touch the iron to both pieces of metal you're connecting so they both heat. And this side of the frame is underneath this side of the frame. So sometimes I may have to tilt my iron a little towards the frame underneath the lower frame to get them to connect. Okay, and that looks pretty good. I'll add a little bit more. So again, you're trying to cover up the seam where these two connect. You still see the seam, they're not connected well enough and they can come apart later. Okay. Okay, pick my iron up, wipe it, pick my iron up, wipe it once on each side, grab that dot of solder, it should hang there, and tilt my iron a little towards the lower underneath frame, touch down and lift up. Didn't quite cover the seam, so I'll do another dot. and it didn't quite cover it, so I'm doing one up, and it's one straight up. It's not one off to the side. It's just straight down, straight up. Okay. Wipe my iron once on each side, grab a dot of solder, straight down, straight up for a second. So one Mississippi, a little more, do it one up instead of one Mississippi, so faster. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm gonna bead solder along this side. And so when I connect these intersecting joints, I'm gonna bead solder instead of tack solder. Again, what does that mean? I need to get that nice rounded bead, and I need to hold my iron straight up instead of flat, so I'm putting my hand underneath so I can hold it straight up. And what's going to happen is, I'll say it because it's going to happen fast. If I do it too slow, I get seep-throughs. But I'm going to start back 1/2 inch and bead up to the frame, but not on it. And so when you go to connect to the frame, you're trying to heat all the metals you're connecting, which are the 2 pieces of foil, the solder, and the metal frame. So the tip of the iron is going to sink down into the foil, and then you're going to come up, and the side of the iron, this side, is going to hit the side of the frame. So it's just going to hit right here. It's not going to, the tip of the iron does not come onto the frame. The side of the iron is going to hit the frame, and the frame will heat, and the solder will jump to the frame as long as you have enough flux. So let's flux that. And again, I'm going to wipe my iron once on each side. I'm going to start back 1/2 inch, and I'm going to get a little bead going, not much. So there's already a little one going. So that's enough of a bead. This right here, we're watching. So on the left side of your iron if you're right-handed. And I'm going to come up to the frame but not on it, and let that iron heat the frame. And you can see this right here, the solder jumps without the iron going on the frame because the iron's hitting the side of the frame. And I'm going to come back off and off to this side. Okay, so we'll flex this. I'm just going to wipe my iron on the side I'm using it, so this front side, I'm going to get a little solder bead going right there. Up to the frame, and you notice I'm holding my iron real straight. If I come back here, there's not enough, sometimes there's not enough of the iron hitting the frame. So I want the iron straight up and off to the side in my L. Give me that nice 90-degree L to finish your piece. So now I'll wipe my iron again. Up to the frame, pause so the frame can heat. The solder jumps, you come back off and off to the side. A little bit of a bead up to the frame. So you do want to flux as far back as your soldering, so that 1/2 inch back. Half inch back, a little bead. Moved a little bit. There we go. Oh, I see a piece of foil that's showing. I see some copper, so I'll come back here and cover it while I'm working on this. So I'm right-handed. It's easiest to do my beads, my intersecting joints on the left side. And if you're left-handed, it's easier to do your beads on the right side. Wipe my iron once on each side, start back 1/2 inch, add a little bit of solder up to the frame, back off and off to the side. This, I'm starting the iron this way, but I have to turn it flush to the frame. Oh, I see that lump there I want to fix, so let me flux further back and come in straight, and I go over that lump, back and forth. And again, my L off to the 90-degree L off to the side. Very important. Okay. So let's flip it and do the other side. And now that the frame is tacked, the frame is all the four corners are done on the other side, I don't necessarily have to do those first. Again, I'm using the beading techniques on the intersecting joints, so we've got a little bubble. And I'm going to use the tacking techniques on the corner, so I'm going to hold my iron over the top, get a dot of solder. Oops, that's going to be hot there. Touch down, lift up. I want to reuse that. Touch down, straight up. Here we go. You'll find if you put on a brass or a copper frame, it takes much longer to heat than the zinc frame. Both copper and brass are a lot stiffer than the zinc, and thicker. So you need to heat it a little bit longer. That's why it's easiest. We're using, also if you're going to black patina, the zinc frame will take black patina. So that's what also why I'm going to patina this black. See, it didn't quite want to jump, so I think I need a little more flux there, or dried. Heat it up. There we go. Okay, I'll flat solder the corner. Tilt my iron towards the lower piece of zinc. I want to heat both pieces of zinc. Add more flux. It's getting a little lumpy. I need a little more. There we go. And I'll hold my iron upright. Flux there. Sometimes it helps not to only be straight, but you can also tip it over a little so it heats a little better. So there we go. So we got all the sides. And take off the electrical tape. And now we need to add on hooks. So we are going to use some basic hooks. They're called jump rings. I kind of like two types of hooks. We're going to put them on the back side. So this is my back side. We're going to put them on the top of the back side. So this is what we're going to add on. These are called jump rings. They are tinned copper wire. What does that mean? Well, tinned means there's a light coating of solder on these, so they're copper underneath, which again is stiffer than zinc, so they don't like to use zinc for jump rings, usually brass or copper. And then they put a light coating of solder on them. The reason they do that is it's easiest to connect two metals when they're tinned, because then you're just reheating the solder on the surface instead of reheating both metals. So if you look, this jump ring has an opening, okay, and that opening is going to get soldered to the center of the back side of the frame. What does that mean? So this is the back of the frame, and we're looking at the center of the distance here. So it's going to get, the bottom of the ring is going to get soldered right there. So that opening we want to make sure it gets soldered shut. So we're gonna put it right about there. So we want the outside of the ring to line up with the outside of the frame, and we want that opening to be in the center of the back side of the frame. This is so I can get solder all around the bottom and over that opening. Okay, so this is a little harder because this frame is actually not 3/16, it's like 5/32. It makes it a little harder. But the other thing we're going to do is later I'm going to black patina this, and black patina the patinas only take if the frame, the solder, all the metals are pretty new and not very oxidized. Oxidation is like corrosion in the air, light, heat. So usually I'll have you, if you're not going to patina right away, I recommend wrapping this in a towel or a saran wrap, putting it under a bed or a table. But this jump ring has old solder on it, so it will not take the black patina. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to re-tin it, so I'm going to put a nice new coating of solder on there. So I'm going to, again, just take a little dot of solder. I don't really need to tin near where the opening is because I'm going to solder over that. So I'll just try and get the other part. You can see the solder is getting spiky, and that's because the gel flux dries so quickly. I mean the liquid flux, the glass star flux. So I'll have that one tinned. I'll go put that on my iron stand so it doesn't burn anything, and I'll tin the other one. That'll give it a minute to cool. If you are not going to patina, you don't have to re-tin these. And the flux. Oh, still spiky. Sometimes just adding flux will get rid of the spikiness. Okay, so let's go back. I have a shaky left hand, so what I'm going to do is I like to put it on the table. That helps me support it. You also want to make sure where you're connecting this jump ring is also tinned, and it's tinned from there to there right now with solder on it. But I want to go over a little bit further, and I'm going to kind of flatten out a little bit more too. Okay. So now what I have to do is connect this jump ring, and I'm going to connect it in 3 places. So I'm going to do left, middle, and right. And when I do that, again, I have to heat both pieces of metal. So I need the tip of the iron is going to touch the frame while the side of the iron hits the jump ring. Okay, so more flux. You can never have too much flux. Again, it's a little easier with gel flux. And again, I'm going to take a dot of solder on the top of the iron that's going to hit the jump ring. And then the tip of the iron hits the frame, and then the side hits the jump ring. Okay? So again, another dot of solder, I'm taking it on the top of the side of the iron. And then I'm going to do the middle. Again, the tip of the iron heated the frame and then touched the side of the jump ring. You have to hold the jump ring the whole time because as soon as you touch it, the heat spreads really quickly, the solder liquefies, and the jump ring will come off. Okay, so I did left, middle, and right. Now I need to get some over the top of that opening in the jump ring. So I'm going to take a little dot of solder, and I'm going to try to get the corner of the iron to hit the frame while the side of the iron hits the jump ring. Okay, so again, I'm going to add more flux. Usually after touching down twice with liquid flux, I actually have to put more flux on, so I need to go back to holding this because it could come off. Okay, so once I get some in there, then I just have to bridge across the top with solder to cover the opening. So you don't want to see the shape of the ring, and you don't want to see the opening. Okay, so now if you look, you can see you can't see the shape of the ring, and there's solder over this part of the ring. Okay, so that's what you want to do. If you look at the front, then I turn around and I look at the front. You can see that there's extra solder there. I'm going to add flux, and I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm going to get rid of that, and then I'm going to flatten it. But I don't want to heat the whole thing at once with the side of my iron. That jump ring could fall off. So I'll tack it left, I'll flatten it left, and then flatten it right. Okay, not the straightest it could be, but so these, I'm making this look really easy. I've done thousands of these. This might take you a few tries to get it on. It's going to fall off on you. So again, I'm going to first flatten this and spread the solder over a little bit more. I also want to make sure my opening is lined up, so I may have to bend it a little to make sure it's lined up. Okay. Rest my hand on the table with a needle, again using needle nose pliers so it doesn't get too hot. I'm going to take a dot of solder and the tip of the iron hits the frame while the side hits the jump ring. On the right side, we'll do the middle. Use a little more in the middle. Didn't quite get the middle there. And then on the left side. Okay. And then I'm going to get some over the top into the middle there. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to get solder over the top, so then use the side of your iron. Now I don't have to heat the metals, I'm just heating the solder that I added underneath this. Okay. If there's too much solder on the side, you can flux it, and again, use the side of your iron and get rid of that. Again, look at your front. You see that? Look at your front. I'm going to flatten it one side and flatten it the other side. There you go. It's up to you if you want to try and fill. There is a little hole in the frame. I don't think anybody's going to see it. That looks pretty good. Okay. So the other type of hooks I like to use are brass hooks with tails. So when you're doing a bigger piece, I mean, there's not much of a connection on these jump rings. They're connected to the top of your frame. So when you hang it, this top frame could pull away, especially if you don't have a lot of solder joints going into the top of the frame. So the stronger way to do it would be, again, you need to tin this first, tin the frame, and then you can solder this hook, again, the bottom of the ring hits the center of the frame, but the tail gets centered on the side of the frame. Now you're distributing the way the project is hung. The weight is some on the side and some across the top, so a much stronger way to do it. I just use brass rods, and I bend them out of a 1/16 of an inch or 7/32 brass rods, so I do 2 different sizes. The other thing about hooks, they need to go, if you don't have a metal frame on it, they need to go into solder joints. So if I didn't put a frame on this, I would have put one of these hooks here into a solder joint and one into here to a solder joint. But you notice these spots aren't symmetrical, so it wouldn't hang straight. So it's always best to add on this frame. And kind of like this, I'll show you a snowflake here. If you look, these jump rings are soldered into a joint where the diamond and the glob are soldered together. You can't just put a jump ring on the end on the foil without any solder joint. That will pull away, over time that foil will pull away and the piece will fall down. So it's really important to solder your hooks into solder joints if you're not putting it on your frame. Okay, so now we're done with this. We can clean up. Again, we want to do a combination of first Windex a couple of times and then alcohol. Okay. Mostly soldered the side. We don't have to worry as much about getting flux into the middle. It does splatter a little. I like to do it a second time. And then we're going to use some 91% isopropyl alcohol with a cotton ball. Frame first, and then again you're going to have to redo all of this. Make sure you get the Windex off.